Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to start out with talking about who and what is the Small Business Development Center. There are people who get a little confused as to what we are, but who is the Small Business Development Center? And I think the best place to actually start is who we are not. A lot of people will confuse us with the Small Business Administration or the SBA. That is who we are not. We are a resource partner of them, but they're a government organization. We're a national nonprofit organization, and we fall under the Americas SBDC. And you'll find in every state that's where they originate from, is under the national organization. Now, if you're in Nebraska, you actually are called the NBDC, the Nebraska Business Development Center, for a number of reasons, but the main reason is because you're actually falling under the Nebraska state government. We actually are fall under the University of South Dakota in Vermilion, and so we're through the education system. Now, one thing about the South Dakota Small Business Development Center is that we're unique in the nation in that we have a whole host of other organizations under our umbrella. In most, if not all the states, these organizations are their own entity. But here in South Dakota, they're all under the SBDC umbrella. Now, first would be the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, or often referred to as PTAC. What they do is they can help you get started in doing federal government contracting. If you're ever in need of a SAM number, that's SAM. Don't ask me what it stands for, something awards management. But if you want to get paid by the federal government, you have to have a SAM number. They can help you get that SAM number, but also help you get started in doing federal government contract work. Next is the Manufacturing and Technology Solutions, MTS. Now, it says manufacturing, but you don't have to be a manufacturer to take advantage of their services. Their two main services is in lean. If you're familiar with lean, that is typically associated with manufacturing, but it could be associated with really any business. So if you want to get more information about what lean is, how it can be used in your business, or become lean certified, that's the organization that can help you. As far as a manufacturing specifically, if you want to get ISO certified, they can help you get that, as well as perform some ISO audits on your organization. Next is the South Dakota International Trade Center. If you're interested in exporting, this is the organization you want to talk to. They can help you navigate those waters, because it's not just as simple as, I'm going to ship it to England. There's a lot of customs and exchange information that you need to be aware of, and they can help you out with that. And then the other one is the Enterprise Institute, which, if you've ever heard the term angel investor, that's what that organization is. It has several different angel investing groups across the state. Now, where are these all located? They're not all located in Rapid. These three, the SBDC, PTAC, and MTS, there's an office right in Rapid. But there's also an office in Sioux Falls. The PTAC is also located in Yankton, and there's an office in Pierre. Enterprise Institute is located in Brookings, and the International Trade Center is located in Sioux Falls as well. And they have a whole host of services available to you. Now, one that I don't have up here is what's called the SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research. Oh, I'm sorry, I do have it here. I can't even read my own writing, folks. This is them here, and they're located in Sioux Falls. But Gary, he's in Rapid a lot of times. I know there's several people from the School of Mines that have called on him to get some help on finding funding for their projects. And so that really concludes the family of SBDC here in South Dakota. So what can the Small Business Development Center help you with specifically? Well, there's a number of services. By far and foremost is we can help you with your projections, whether you're wanting to do a startup or you maybe already have a business, but you'd like to do an expansion. We can help you do those projections, whether it's a lender who's requiring those, or maybe it's something that you want for yourself. Next is guiding you through writing that business plan. Now, we don't necessarily write the plan for you, but if you'd like, we can provide you with a template to get you started. Once you get that plan written, we can review it and give you some feedback on what changes and additions you might include in that plan. And keep in mind, when we look at it through the eyes of a lender. Because we have an insight as to what they're looking for in your business plan. Third is industry research. We have a number of resources to get you national and regional research. Our access to local research really is limited, unfortunately, because we are in South Dakota. There's not a lot of publicized research for the individual industries out there. But what we can do on the local level is get you revenue data, sales tax data. But the best source is really contacting people you know in that industry. The industry benchmarks and financial analysis, that can be one or two separate services. We have a number of pieces of software that we can use for that, whether it's the same software we use for projections, or else we do have a separate software called Profit Sense that we can really compare you to the industry and give you feedback as to where is your business lacking and possibly ways to improve that, or where is your business excelling and the ideas of how you can take advantage of those areas that you really do shine in. And then, of course, cash flow. That cash is the king, profit is prince. You might have heard that before. With this, it's so important to know what your cash flow projection is so you can accurately or more reasonably plan for your expansion, and just especially if you're a seasonal business, to budget your money out so you don't have to go and borrow on a line of credit, and just overall planning is involved here. And then finally is helping you identify different funding sources. And here what we have is just a 30,000-foot view of different funding sources. For the startup business, we say your pocket. You might have heard of the three F's, friends, families, and fools. They say they can be one or they can be three separate entities. That really is the beginning part of your funding sources when you're a startup. And of course, there's traditional lenders, whether it's a bank or credit union. I can tell you if you go to traditional lenders, which happen to be our number one referral source, is that they'll want you to have a projection and a business plan. And if you come to see us first and then go to your lender, that puts you in a whole different light because you'll come in already planned to answer their questions. The loan funds. Now, there's a lot of different loan funds out here. And specifically to the West River area, like Elevate, that would be an example of a loan fund. Another one is the West River Revolving Loan Fund. They have loans if you're based in Rapid City, and then they have a separate pool of money in the event that you're outside of Rapid City in a rural area or the small towns. And speaking of the small towns, each one may have its own loan funds. I happen to know that Hot Springs has one, Deadwood Lead does, Spearfish, Sturgis, I believe Box Elder does. But if you don't know, the best way to find out is call your local chamber office, and they can tell you for sure and who the contact information is. Now, if you're an established business, there's obviously additional sources available to you. As I mentioned, the Enterprise Institute and angel investors. That's kind of not quite the startup, but maybe you've got a year or two under your belt and you're needing some money for an expansion. And another one is a private equity groups. With both of these, I would just be careful as to who you literally get in bed with here, because you need to have your values and your philosophies matched. Otherwise, it won't make a good partnership, and you'll both be wishing you can get out of it. As I mentioned, this is an overview. It can go a lot deeper than this, but we could talk about hours, and really, it depends on your business as to who your sources of funding are. And that's why we didn't give more than just more than an overview here. Now, where can you get all this information? Well, there's a couple ways you can do it. Here we've got our website, sdbusinesshelp.com. If you go out there, you will see all of those organizations on our website. And then if you click on that, you can get your contact information. And for example, if you went out there and you wanted the SBDC, you'll scroll down and you'll see all the consultants at our 7 locations. So our locations are Rapid City, Pierre, Yankton, Sioux Falls, Aberdeen, and Watertown, and Brookings. I almost forgot one there. But they're all out there, as well as MTS, PTAC, SBIR, International Trade, and Enterprise Institute. Now, if you're in the West River business area, this includes parts of Wyoming, is simply call our West River Business Service Center. And Sally, who would be the one that answers the phone, she'll get you to the person that you need to talk to. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Belinda. She's going to talk about exiting a business. Again, this is an in-depth topic, so we're only scratching the surface here. Belinda.
Thanks, Matt. Everybody hear me? Am I unmuted? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Hello, I'm Belinda Engelhart, and I'm really happy to be with you today to talk with you a few minutes about a topic that is a challenge to even the very best and most organized business owner. Slide, Matt, please. What? Oh, okay, there we go. What is succession planning? Succession planning is a strategy for passing on leadership roles, often the ownership of a company, to an employee or group of employees, known as replacement planning. It ensures that the businesses continue to run smoothly after a company's most important people move on to new opportunities, retire, or pass away. And I include that definition and the clarification that I'm going to talk about exit or transitioning as well as pure succession planning. And if I've missed the mark with any of you, just contact me afterwards and we can talk about it. It's a very broad subject. Next slide, Matt. The International Business Brokers Association, the IBBA, reports that 80% of businesses are not ready to exit. And I see that regularly. I find that in my office, I work more with buyers than with sellers. And I think that's because of this 80% finding that people just are not ready, or they don't position themselves to sell. They say that owners will choose to leave their businesses, a third of them hoping to sell their business, a third of them want a family member to assume control, and a third plan to just sell down their inventories, let their staff go and close the doors. And I think we see in the Small Business Development Center, we've seen a combination of all of those. Next slide, Matt. Most owners are not ready and don't really understand what it will mean to leave their business, how to do it successfully, or who can help. Next slide, Matt. Business advisors agree the best time to sell a business is when it's doing well. But if you think about human nature, that's exactly the time that we really would hesitate to leave the business, when it's doing well. Next slide, Matt. There are many, many decisions related to leaving a business. Maybe it's age, or maybe there's a desire to do something different. Maybe there are several reasons why owners are actually forced to exit their business. Maybe there's some financial or personal distress. Maybe there's a disability, a physical disability. Maybe there's a divorce in the family. There are dynamics that change, whether it's in the markets or technology is changing. Maybe there are disputes between partners, or maybe there's the death of a principal owner. All of these can happen at any, they're all in, one or another is almost inevitable. And the business owner really, really, really needs to be prepared. Next slide, Matt. The transition can occur in a couple of different ways, either standing up or lying down. And for this presentation, I think we will focus on the standing up version. Small business owners work hard to earn a living and support their families and their employees. Too often they are working in their business and not on their business, and they wear several hats. They're often myopic about conditions of the market, the industry, or the geography. And so it leads them to spend a lot of time in, but not on the business. Next slide, Matt. Too often, many small business owners hurt their opportunities to successfully attract buyers and transition at maximum value because of their own business practices. Small business owners often, on the advice of professionals, operate their business for two reasons, and you might identify those. First, to maximize owner benefits, and second, to minimize taxes. We see this every day in our offices. They do it so much so that if they pay any taxes, they believe they've not accomplished their first goal. So they go back and they do everything that they can to increase owner benefits, expense them through the company, and thereby decrease tax obligations. In many situations, showing a paper profit is not the primary concern, as long as cash flow is sufficient to meet the company's financial obligations and their personal needs. Many small businesses underreport their revenue through cash transactions, through bartering relationships, through selective accounting, by maybe moving sales or expenses from one year to another to have a greater impact or for tax reduction. They may use company assets and inventory for personal purposes. This increases cost of goods sold. It also drives up other expenses. They may keep ghost inventories, which are old or useless inventories, on their balance sheet so that it looks better and more profitable to the bank or even to buyers. A small business may have become static over the years. The market is dynamic, but their business isn't. Their marketing plan, if they have one, may be reactive and not proactive. Technology has not been embraced. The business might be top heavy. Many of the buyers that come to my office talk about what they can do in the small business once they buy it, because the seller has claimed to be tired of the business, tired of doing what they do. And as such, they have just not done everything that they can do to maximize the opportunity that they have to sell the business. This is a very short-sighted strategy. It's focused on now, and it minimizes reported financial returns instead of maximizing opportunities and so on. Additionally, this method produces messed up back, but that's okay. Additionally, this sort of management creates messed up ratios and other performance measurements that are really needed when a financial transaction of selling a business occurs. The business value is minimized, at least on paper, that the business operates with too high a level of expenses and too low of a profit level. And oftentimes that that method of keeping the books and operating the business doesn't even support one of the financial returns that a buyer should have from a business investment, whether it's salary or return on equity or debt service. One of the things that lenders calculate immediately is the debt service ratio. When they do that, they use the financial records and the tax returns of the existing company to measure this demonstrated ability. They don't look at the pro forma forecasts. Many of those that we create for a client, when the client comes in, remember they said they're buying this tired business, but with their excitement and enthusiasm and energy, they can do more in the business. Well, the lenders are looking at historical financials. That's the record of the business. And so I encourage any of you who are business owners out there to make that paper trail and make it positive. A business that doesn't show a profit can't obtain financing for expansion or for a buyer. Also, it can't support the blue sky or the goodwill that an owner wants because of the way the business has been reportedly or actually performs. And I say this to my clients all the time. The seller can't get their money twice on established goodwill. They either take their money by maximizing their owner benefits to an extreme level, or they get it as a premium when they sell the business. It's almost as simple as that. But there is time to change. Most lenders want to see a 3-year financial records. And so planning is really important, and it's important to start perhaps 3 to 5 years out. But let's just settle on 3, because that's what the lenders are really looking for, is 3 years of financials. New slide, Matt. Okay, so if an owner wants to sell the business, they need to focus their time and energy on profitability, a competitive edge, looking for sustainability and scalability, and their corporate culture, because if it's very important that the business is able to hold on to good people as well. And then on a side note, most efforts to transition a business fail because the business is too owner dependent. And some of that's a little bit of ego. We don't want to let go, and we don't share all the information that we should with employees. So what happens to the business if we're not there? But I digress. Let's go to the next slide, Matt. So now is the time. So like I said, let's say 3 years out. The studies recommend that a business puts together a team to work on that exit plan with you, the business owner. So look at an attorney, an accountant, your lender, your insurance agent, your financial advisor, and all of these people should be well versed in business transactions and planning and wealth maximization. I have an example to share. I have a client, a young man, who worked for a business for several years, and he was given the opportunity to purchase the business because the owner was aging. And it took some time to get the financing put together, which is often the case for many of my small business buyers. But as the transaction was being completed, the seller discovered the amount of tax that he would be obligated to pay. And the deal was off. It was just off. He was not going to pay that tax. So about a year later, my client, the buyer, was actually able to purchase the business. And I believe it was the inclusion of the financial planner and the tax advisor, who were brought into the process a little bit late, that made the difference. But that deal got done because, and it certainly helped the seller to minimize his tax obligation, which was very important to him. Now, that planning process that I was talking about with that team, that the team can help you, the business owner, with a range of minor tweaks to your financial record keeping, minor tweaks to your legal structure, or very significant changes to the business's operation to ensure that as an owner, your value is maximized. And then as we go forward 2 years before selling, you just keep reviewing that plan. Let's say every quarter, you just go into it and you look, okay, are we on track to complete the goals that we had set? Create an annual report for you as well as for those advisors that you have in place, but keep working on that exit plan until you get to a year out. And one of the very important questions that as a seller you should be able to ask, it's the question I ask every one of my buyers who come in: why is that person selling the business? Because it makes a lot of difference on the buyer's negotiating powers. What's the seller's motivation to sell? That's always a big question to me, and it's one that every owner should be prepared to answer. As well as the owner should have some idea about how much money he or she wants for that business. And that's a tough one, always a tough one. I think we need the next slide, Matt. Yeah, 80% of owners overestimate the value of their business compared to 25% who undervalue their business to a buyer. It's really a tough one. That decision is often made very emotionally. The seller might determine a price based on the time and energy that it took him or her to grow that business, or the perception of how good that business is, or someone might have told them how good the business is, or they might have come across one or more rules of thumb that help them determine what is that value of business. I had one seller who had made some really, really, really bad decisions in her business. And so she wanted to sell and get out of it. And the purchase price was all of that debt that she had incurred in very wrong. But that wasn't the buyer's problem. Her debt, her mismanagement wasn't the buyer's problem. In a real world, valuation is based on quantifiable criteria, not the owner's personal estimation of worth. And if nothing else, the lenders will make that distinction. They will or will not make a loan, based on that and a number of other criteria. What I've discovered, there's a threshold at which a business should pay for a business valuation. Those are very comprehensive. They can be very costly. And so for our smaller businesses, most of the time, a business valuation, a formal business valuation, is not something that we recommend. When I'm working with a buyer, we oftentimes just look at what is the value of the debt service. What kind of debt service can that business support, along with salaries and other expenses. So that's where that's at. And I can certainly take questions as we go forward if you have any. Next slide, Matt. Okay, we're talking now about buying and selling. Again, next slide, Matt. There is an author who provides 9 different ways to exit a business that are suggested. And that level of value, much of it is based on the likelihood of the opportunities for negotiation, or the fact that there will be little to no negotiation in the sale. So very briefly, we'll just talk about that list. A strategic buyer or a strategic transaction is one where it's a sale to a competitor, perhaps someone in the same industry who's looking for synergistic benefits. Perhaps there's really not much negotiation there at all. It's oftentimes a cash sale. And oftentimes that purchaser doesn't care to have any additional interaction with the seller. And so the seller just takes their money and goes on. The next level of exit is with the key employee group. And it said that this is the most underutilized method of transition. And one of the reasons for that is that most owners don't believe that they pay their employees enough to be able to afford to buy the business. And that's probably true. but many times it is something that can and should be worked out. One of the ways, just talk briefly about what we call the multi-phase transitional model. And it's a way for the seller to actually, over time, it's a timely process, but over time actually perhaps receive full fair market value as opposed to a negotiated value, because these people are not in a position to negotiate. But over time, they can accumulate enough equity to actually purchase that business and carry on and use the commitment and the experience that they have in the business. The multi-phase transitional model is actually a model where over time, a longer period of time, the employee buys a small portion of the business, a small percentage, and then at the end of the year shares in the profit or the loss of that business. The profit then is reinvested for more shares of equity, and over a period of time, then that employee has accumulated enough equity that he or she is then able to take out the rest of the debt. And over time, the seller will likely stay in the business, and if not take a salary, at least get a consulting fee. I'm really breaking this down. We've got a number of steps that I'd be happy to share with anyone who is interested in following up on a multi-phase transitional model. I have an example of a client who I think would have worked very well with that. We did talk with the buyer about it, but he did ultimately make his deal work. This guy I've worked with for 9 years. 9 years. He really wanted to purchase a particular business. And the seller wanted to sell, however, he was reluctant to give up control. The price of that business was high, but the business was profitable, and on paper, it would show that it could support the debt service. Now, it was a high price, and the buyer, the young man who wanted to buy the business, couldn't get the funding. He also didn't have a lot of experience in the industry, and he had some existing personal debt. So he quit his day job and went to work for this business. Now he's getting experience. He sold his home and moved his family to a rental closer to this business. Now that eliminated his personal debt. And over the years, he would follow up with me and he'd follow up with the lenders. The seller actually went south every winter, leaving my client in charge. And ultimately, the deal was completed. The seller did some carryback. But this was a piece that would have really worked well for a multi-phase transitional model. And actually, I think you could turn this into a key employee, because this guy actually made himself a key employee and was ultimately able to purchase that business. Another level is an unidentified third party, where someone sees the business for whatever reason and chooses to buy it, whether it's in an industry that he or she is looking for, or in a location, or the kind of service, or so on. But this is one where the buyer actually approaches the seller. So it leaves the seller with more opportunity or less opportunity. It leaves the buyer with less opportunity for negotiation, because the seller is in more control there. The next level is a shareholder or partner level of value. That's pretty straightforward. It can be very complex in practice, but the idea is that you have a partner who can buy out one or the other. And one of the keys there is to have a good, strong buy-sell agreement. An identified third party is just the opposite of the unidentified third party. That is where the seller approaches a friend or a family member or someone else and asks if he or she would like to purchase the building. That gives the seller less negotiating power. If all of those levels fail, there are always business brokers, and it's really good to understand the broker, the kind of business that he or she runs, the licensure that they have, the way they charge fees, and so on. I don't have anyone in my portfolio right now that's using a business broker. Another level, a very public level, a shotgun approach is the realtor sale. And that is a sale that's not confidential at all. It's very most public. That's another concern that I guess I haven't talked about in this presentation, but it's the confidentiality. It's a question I don't think there's a right or wrong answer about who you tell about the business for sale. But when it goes to a realtor, there is not a lot of confidentiality. It's generally marketed very publicly. I have an example. This example will tell you how everything can seem right, but in this complex process of trying to transition out of a business, sometimes it takes very much longer than one anticipates. About a year ago, last August, I have a call from a buyer from out of state who was looking to buy a business in my town. His wife is from South Dakota and she wanted to return. Now, the business in question is a very successful one, and I really don't know if that seller had positioned himself to sell, but the reality of it is I think he just runs a very, very clean business, and his financials supported the debt service that would be required. The buyer is bankable. He had some funds to go into the business, and he understands the industry. So there are a number of barriers to that sale. It's the high price of the business, the fact that it's a very unique business, and an inexperienced person couldn't or shouldn't buy it. Everything seemed right, and the realtor was calling me every week to determine where was that sale, how is it going. The buyer, however, I think the deal is still on, but my point is everything seemed right about that sale. The business was good, the paper trail was excellent, the buyer was good. And I think he'll come back because, remember, the wife wants to move back to South Dakota. But it's taking far longer than the realtor expected it to take and that the seller expected it to take. One of the latest wrinkle is the buyer's opportunity for a buyout with the industry in which he currently works. And so it made better sense for him to stay where he's at and work out that buyout. But everything seemed right in this one, and it didn't necessarily work the way all was expecting, although I think it still might. Liquidation is the lowest level of value, and it's the one where a business is not expected to continue, obviously. Succession by family members leaves a value of 0 to 1. You realize that in some family situations, the business is actually gifted to another generation. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen. Or I've had examples of families where I thought, my goodness, parents, how can you charge your kids this amount of money for that business? So one never knows. It's more of an art than an absolute science. I have one more example that I'd like to share with you. It brings together a combination of all of these ways to exit, many of these ways to exit. My husband and a partner owned a farm equipment dealership, and between our two families, we had 5 sons and 1 daughter. And while the kids were growing up, they spent time working in the business, but none had any interest in family succession into that business. Then there came the time when my husband was ready to leave. His partner was not, so they began the discussion of a partner buyout. Now, they had a very strong and well-written buy-sell agreement. And I will encourage any one of you who owns a business with a partner, have a good buy-sell agreement. If you don't have one today, get one written. I really encourage that. Anyway, before that could be concluded, that transaction, on one icy November morning, the partner's vehicle slid through an intersection in front of a truck, and he was killed instantly. Can anything be more unsettling to a business than the death of a principal? The two partners, my husband and his partner, had key man insurance, and this is another bit of advice I would give to all of you. If you own a business, get yourself key man insurance. You have a small business, you have a large business. Have yourself insured. This is an insurance policy, a life insurance policy, where the business is the beneficiary. And I encourage every one of you, for the peace of mind that it offers to your family, to get key man insurance. Okay, so remember, my husband's intention was to leave the business. So for the next year, he methodically worked the succession plan for the business. Now, after his partner died, there were employees who believed that the business would close. Actually, a couple of the kids in our families believed that the business would close. But my husband spent a year dissolving the corporation, liquidating the business essentially, paying all the obligations and payables and collecting all the receivables and getting rid of obsolete inventory through auction, and then securing a strategic buyer to purchase the assets of the business. And through that full year that it took to complete that transition, 20 plus employees worked and drew their paychecks every week. Customers were served with no interruption, and the dealership continues today. But they had a foundation for succession. It didn't work out quite the way that they anticipated, but they were always planning, and they had a foundation for succession, and it helped to make that happen. So I'm here to say it can be done. It's generally not simple. There is not one right way to exit a business. It's not always linear. It doesn't always make sense. There are very many variables. And I repeat, there's not one way out. But what I would suggest, if you take nothing away from this presentation today, have a good paper trail, because you can work as hard as you possibly can in your business. But if you don't have the records to support that, you don't have a business to sell. And we've seen it over and over again. Matt, could we have another slide, please? Okay, this just talks about us. And it just says that the SBDC provides professional, confidential, no-cost business consulting services. Matt did a fine job of explaining early on what we did and how, where, and how we do it. We do work with buyers or sellers, but as I said before, we work mostly with buyers because the sellers have not taken their time to make that good plan that they need to have. In fact, if I could just go back to one of my examples, the guy who I worked with for 9 years to actually get him into the business, I said to him, because by now he's in his mid-40s, I said, you realize that someday you are going to want to sell this business? And he just kind of smiled at me. And I would bet that probably the exit is not top of his mind right now. Anyway, I think we have a thank you slide, and then I am finished, Matt. And we can certainly take any questions if anyone has some for Matt or for me. Thank you. And I would certainly encourage you all, if you don't have questions that you want to bring to us right now, you've got Matt's contact information, and you can get mine through the website if you have questions or anything that we can help you with, because that's what we're here for.
Thank you both for this great presentation today. I will send out your slideshow to the participants, and then don't forget to go to elevaterapidcity.com and sign up for any of the upcoming trainings we have. We have a lot of great ones coming for November, so please check that out. There will be a replay of this webinar available on Elevate Rapid City's YouTube channel. So if you missed part of it, or perhaps want to go back and listen to something, or maybe someone else you know would be interested in hearing it, you can go to the Elevate Rapid City YouTube channel and share it. But with that, that concludes today's webinar. Thank you, Belinda and Matt, and thank you for those who tuned in, and I hope everyone has a great afternoon.